Congress sent President Barack Obama legislation to avoid a national fiscal cliff of middle-class tax increases and spending cuts late Tuesday night. The bill passed on a bipartisan 257 to 167 vote in the House. The Oklahoman's Casteel spoke with members of Oklahoma's delegation on Wednesday. Casteel spoke with Representative Tom Cole, who voted yes, and Representative James Langford, who was the only member of the 7-member Oklahoma delegation to oppose it.
The deal is a complex deal. Look, we were faced with a situation where taxes are going to go up on every single American that paid income taxes. And we're going to have massive rises in capital gains and in dividends taxes. And we were also going to have a massive decrease or an increase, however you want to look at it, in estate taxes, which is pretty important in a place like Oklahoma with lots of family farms and ranches. So we had an opportunity to make 85% of the tax cuts of the Bush era permanent for 98% of the American people. Take them out of the line of fire. I've been arguing that for some considerable time. Get rid of the alternative minimum tax forever. We've had that as a problem since the late 1960s, trying to do it, fix it in patches. So there were enough good things in the bill to override the things I don't like. And you know, contrary to what's widely reported, there were no tax increases in the bill. The Bush tax cuts were all set to run out. What we did in the bill was save as many of them as we possibly could for as many people as we could. And again, that's 85% of the money for 98% of the people. I think that was the appropriate thing to do.
The fiscal cliff deal, we're really dealing with two issues, the fiscal cliff and then the debt and the deficit. The fiscal cliff is just a single event in a larger work to try to deal with our debt and deficit. Unfortunately, the fiscal cliff really didn't address the debt and deficit. It did the tax policy, and that's the difficulty in dealing with all legislation here in Washington, D.C. Usually 60% of it you'll like, 40% of it you don't, and you have to decide that 40% is bad enough that you won't vote for it. In this bill, it did provide tax certainty. It dealt with the state tax. It dealt with the AMT, the alternative minimum tax. It dealt with giving permanency for tax rates, which is a very big deal. So there were some really good things in it. But it actually increases our deficit by some additional spending, and it doesn't address the overarching issue where the president had said he wanted all along to do some sort of 3-to-1, $3 of cuts to $1 of tax increases. This was neither of those. And so to me, I want us to keep working until we can actually get to a deal that helps us get out of our fiscal hole rather than just get past the fiscal cliff.
So what happens next? Casteel asked both Cole and Langford to look ahead.
The spending battle now shifts, and that was a matter of some contention in the caucus, but as I said, if you want to be in a spending fight, don't worry, we've got one coming up. I mean, the sequester runs out in 2 months. That's across the board spending cuts. The continuing resolution, which is what we operate under, has to be extended within 3 months. That'll be a spending fight. And then, of course, there's the debt ceiling, which is sort of the most important of these 3 triggering events, and that's going to happen sometime in the same time frame, 2 to 3 months. So this will be the time where, to avoid those things, the Democrats are going to have to put real spending cuts and real entitlement reforms on the table. And the revenue portion of this is now settled, and honestly, off the table. And the president could talk about a balanced approach, but he got his revenue. Now it's his turn to balance. And I think politically we're on much firmer ground to get the kind of concessions that Democrats don't want to give in terms of spending and entitlements, but that we know we need to restore the fiscal balance of the country.
The president's now locked in the last couple of days to say that he wants tax increases every time we reduce spending. To me, that seems a little absurd. You don't do tax increases just because you want to make some deal. You do tax increases when you have to do something like a tax increase, not because you just, every time we're going to cut spending, we have to raise taxes with no real purpose on it. Yes, we desperately need to deal with spending, and even people on my Facebook page recently have posted, some Democrats even, to say, okay, now the tax issues are done, now it's time to get on with spending. And I would agree, it's time to get on with the spending. The tax increases that were just put in place will increase taxes about $60 billion a year. That still leaves almost $1 trillion in overspending every single year. So it's obvious this is not a tax fix. We have to deal with the spending side. We're spending $1 trillion more a year than what we did just 5 years ago, and we can't keep doing this.
Casteel reports a cut in the payroll tax was not extended, which means every wage earner will see a smaller paycheck starting this month. Payroll tax goes to fund Social Security. and it's different than the income tax, which funds most of government services.
That was actually something there wasn't much contention about. The reality is it was always labeled in the original legislation a payroll tax holiday. It was meant to be a stimulus. When it was enacted, unemployment was higher considerably than it is today. So neither side contested that because you do have to fund Social Security. I mean, that's just the reality of it, and people can't underpay it and then expect the full benefit further down the road. And it is a pay-as-you-go system, so it just was increasing the deficit. And it's a considerable amount of money. It's well over $100 billion a year. But, again, it's something that, again, I think Republicans are historically pretty reluctant to lower payroll taxes because you always have to bring them back on. I mean, you can't fund Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security without them. So, again, that really was a matter of agreement between the two parties.
Payroll tax holiday 2 years ago was intended to be a one-year holiday and then was extended again by this Congress, and even it was assumed it would go away after that. Payroll tax is specifically geared towards Social Security, and so the challenge of that is you're either going to dramatically increase debt or you're going to cut at Social Security. It is something that needs to stay in place to be able to stabilize Social Security. Democrats and Republicans, including the President, agreed from the very beginning that we've got to get the payroll tax back where it should have been before to be able to stabilize Social Security and start paying back in that trust fund. So it was never an issue through all of the negotiations, the House, White House, or the Senate, that the payroll tax wouldn't go back from that temporary decrease for a while to go back to its normal rate.